What's up, guys? Welcome back to Punk Politics. I'm Abe Thompson. Today, I want to talk about the gig economy. Now, that's a term that captures a lot of different jobs for a lot of different companies, but chiefly, it means that subset of job in which people find employment, they get paid, but it's on a hugely flexible or insecure basis. Now, the most lazy examples are, of course, your Deliveroo drivers, riders, Uber Eats, Uber drivers, but it also encapsulates people who stack shelves in Amazon warehouses, the guy in the Amazon van, and, office admin temp staff. It's anyone who makes their money on a temporary contract where they have a minimal notice period, no workplace pension, no in-work benefits. The only realistic kind of upside to doing this kind of job is that you can clock in and out whenever you want to. But as many of those who ride Deliveroo bikes or drive Uber cars will testify, the chances of you rewarding yourself with 2 or 3 days off when you make so little is kind of slim to none, I guess. Now, the gig economy is sort of the government's friend because as, Brexit decimates certain industries, others move their entire workforces over to Berlin and Paris. Maybe automation, AI and robots gobble up other jobs. High street shops and industrial centres, like retail sectors, slowly wind down. The gig economy is right there to scoop up that labour force. You got students, postgrads, people studying for their masters, guys that used to have office jobs that for one reason or another they had to leave, and now this is the only thing local to them that's hiring. But whatever the situation is or was that propelled you into working in the gig economy, the key thing from the government's perspective is this: unemployment is down, guys. I read a thing the other day that said there's never been so many people in work as there is right now. I was like, oh, well, amazing. Oh, that's good, yeah. Now tell us what kind of jobs they're doing. What are the biggest growth sectors? Where are the biggest jobs markets like booming in the UK? Take a wild guess. They always back criticism back, like, oh, don't be so snobby about, what, you never delivered pizzas? You never worked stacking shelves somewhere? Just stop looking down your nose at everyone. And this is my response to people like that. It's like, okay, all right. So if you think driving a Deliveroo bike around on minimum wage with no corporate benefits, no pension, and very little security, if you think that is such a promising role, how come none of the shadow cabinet or cabinet are doing it as their second job? Because the fact is, these are not good jobs. If they paid well, they would be good jobs. But again and again, what we're seeing is the big corporations behind them, i.e. your Ubers, your Deliveroos, Amazons, and so on, they cream the profits and then pay the absolute bare minimum to their riders and drivers. Now, legally, these riders and drivers are seen kind of as contractors. In fact, the Supreme Court recently decided that they cannot be viewed as employees, and that effectively removes them from any conversation about benefits or a pension. They can't get guaranteed shifts, and I think they're prohibited from even forming a union now. Technically, they're seen as little more than subscribers to software. They download an app, they say, yeah, I'll pick up that person over there for this much money. Then Uber connect them, a transaction is made, and Uber HQ take a sort of management or transaction fee, but legally, technically, that's all it is. Even though we all know and love Uber as a sort of taxi service, legally, they just kind of see themselves as a software provider. And it's kind of the same with Deliveroo. Now, I think what's really interesting about this is if you look at more kind of economically competitive nations, places with low corporate tax, little to no in-place work benefits, total absence of employers' NI. If you look at places like that, corporations just boom. And that is sort of the environment that the Conservative Party want to take the UK into inhabiting. Jeremy Hunt has gone on record 2 or 3 times this week. I've heard him in interviews where he's been like, if you look at economies like the USA and Canada and China, where you get economies booming, tends to be the places where you get a low tax sort of culture. Now, he can't lower taxes because the debt to GDP is so high. But what he can do is attempt to replicate that same sort of low tax Singapore-on-Thames business environment. And in a similar capacity, corporations like Deliveroo, Uber, Amazon are kind of restricted in terms of how they have to treat their employees. They have to give them a certain number of annual leave days every year. They've got to give them a pension, maternity leave, workplace training, and all of that costs so much money on top of the employer's national insurance. But in the same way that Jeremy Hunt is kind of restricted in terms of what he can do with low tax versus GDP, these guys are restricted with HR legislation, but what they can do is employ people on a contractual, temp, gig economy basis. And then they're just free. They don't have to pay any of that stuff. Well, you were looking for financial security and paternity leave, were you? On your bike. Of course, at some point, this booming gig economy will begin to subside. Automation will continue to gobble up roles, and as people are vomited out of their industries into riding cars for Uber or whatever the case may be, we're going to hit a glass ceiling because there's only so many people who can afford to take an Uber, who can afford to pay 38 quid for a delivered meal at KFC to their family or whatever. You know who can't afford to order food from Deliveroo? Deliveroo riders. So while Supreme Court judgments might, in the short term, benefit big corporations like Deliveroo, in the medium to long term, it doesn't really answer any of the challenges that we're facing. Right now, we have a gig economy, which should be perceived as almost like a sort of, like a subset of the economy. It's basically Little China. But at some point, it's going to grow and it's going to grow and it's going to hit that glass ceiling. And at that point, these gig economy companies are going to have to do mass layoffs, terminate those contracts, and then we're going to be greeted with the same questions that some of us have been asking for months, if not years. How are you going to keep a roof over people's heads and keep them fed and stop the UK from sliding into civil unrest when the number of jobs out there that they can reasonably do appears to be slowly, ever so slowly, almost glacially, kind of falling off a cliff? That's it for this one, guys. What do you think about the Supreme Court ruling? Do you think Deliveroo riders should be seen as employees? Or maybe you think these kind of jobs are actually incredibly good because while you're earning your money, you still have the flexibility to pursue other things like, I don't know, YouTube, music, comedy, whatever. As always, let me know in the comments below. I'm out.